What's up, folks? I wanted to throw this little disclaimer in front of this video so I can kind of introduce the philosophy. This is not something that's going to be very visually appealing. There's no shooting in this video. There's not even any really video footage in it. You'll see some text on the screen. You'll see some pictures that help to illustrate kind of what I'm talking about. But it's really intended to be something you listen to. So feel free to throw on your headphones, listen to it while you're driving, but I'd encourage you to digest the 15 minutes of audio here. I'm going to dig into some stuff that I hear talked about constantly in the online gun community. And people that have a lot to say on either sides of the debate sometimes get lost in what I call the idiocy of dialogue. So please just listen to it, think about it, have an open mind. Regardless of where you fall in this debate, I think this will put some logic on the table for you to think about. So without further ado, appreciate your subscribership. If you're not subscribed, please hit the button. And there'll be better things to look at coming, but for now, dig into the content, and I hope that it equips you for debates that you may see happening around you. I'm going to preface this commentary with the following disclaimer. Nothing contained here is intended to be inflammatory, insulting, or aimed at anyone in particular. I'm simply stating my informed opinion on a topic that I see steeped in a substantial amount of ignorance and ego-fueled dogma. My goal is to educate and encourage free thinking. For whatever it's worth, I call myself informed based on my professional experience with firearms and tactics. For example, I am a veteran with multiple combat deployments. I've spent 13 years in private sector security contracting. I am a NRA law enforcement firearms instructor for handgun, shotgun, patrol rifle, and tactical shooting. I hold a Force Science Institute certification in human factors and use of force. And I have a master's degree in criminal justice, advanced counterterrorism, and homeland security. Not that it matters. I do not claim to know everything. Far from it, actually. But suffice it to say that I'm not a layman. Without further ado, here goes. I frequently see statements such as these on gun forums, YouTube videos, training courses, and during gun shop lobby banter. You don't need blank for a defensive pistol. That stuff is for competition shooting. The blank is usually referencing some individual piece or grouping of aftermarket accessories that are historically common in race guns intended for competition shooting and are now finding their way, theoretically, on defensive and duty weapons, or at least purportedly so according to Facebook and Instagram photos. The discussions that typically follow these comments are rife with ego, emotions, and ignorance on both sides of the debate. And any logical defense by either camp is quickly buried in the overwhelming idiocy of the rest of the dialogue. The first flaw is the structure of the statement itself. How does one define need in terms of a non-competition handgun? What is the philosophy of use for said handgun? Just because it's not a competition-specific handgun doesn't mean that it's a tool trusted for the preservation of life and safety. It might just be a range toy. Not that it should necessarily matter. For the purposes of this commentary, let's assume that the handgun is for duty and defense, as someone's preferences for a range toy should be allowed to be completely subjective without reproach. What one person finds to be fun is of no legitimate concern for another as long as laws aren't being broken. Now let's dig into defining need. When a handgun is used defensively or offensively, the practical goal is fairly simple: win. So then, we need to define win, which is open to more subjectivity. To keep us all in the same sheet of music, let's say winning is inflicting deadly physical force at a rate of effectiveness as to cause your adversary to abandon his or her attack, either voluntarily or involuntarily, before inflicting said deadly force upon you or others in immediate jeopardy. Okay, so now we know what guns we're discussing: duty and defensive handguns. What the goal is, winning, and how to define it. The next question is, what does it take to win? The simple answer is combat effectiveness. A less simple, but perhaps more appropriate way to answer the question would be the properly balanced application of the core fundamentals, sight picture, sight alignment, and trigger press, and core techniques, stance, grip, and draw, to maximize the speed of attack while maintaining the necessary accuracy to hit the intended target. In short, we need speed and accuracy to win the fight. Let's discuss the types of accessories that many declare should stay in competition, while defenders and professional operators keep it stock, or at least more stock. Bear in mind, there is no consensus within the keep it more stock camp as to which accessories are allowed per se. The list usually contains the following aftermarket options: trigger kits, sights, compensators, red dot optics, stippling or other grip enhancements, match grade barrels, flared magazine wells, extended controls like slide stops and magazine releases, weighted guide rods, non-standard recoil spring weights, and so on and so forth. I'm sure I'm leaving out something that has been fought to the death over at one time or another on the interwebs of knowledge. Before breaking any of these individual parts down to discover their specific impact on competition effectiveness, we should probably qualify what competition effectiveness is. We know the goal of any competition is to win. How do you win a shooting competition? Brace yourself. Be the fastest, be the most accurate, or rather have the best balance of the two. Sound familiar? I'm going to take the aforementioned accessories that are typically debated and divide them into two categories. The first will be those parts whose intent is to aid in the improvement of speed. The second will be those whose intent is to aid in the application of accuracy. Some parts may be listed in both groups. Group 1, the speed group. Trigger kits, sights, compensators, red dot optics, grip enhancements, flared magazine wells, extended controls, weighted guide rods. Group 2, the accuracy group. Trigger kits, sights, red dot optics, match grade barrels. Now let's break them down individually, starting with Group 1. Trigger kits. Trigger kits can aid in the improvement of speed by shortening the pre-travel, travel, and reset of the trigger in movement, decreasing the mechanical time of operation, basically requiring less mileage for the same trip. Just like in a car, with less distance, the trip takes less time, aka increased speed. Sights. Aftermarket sights can fall into many various categories, each with its own set of intended effects. Night sights speed up sight acquisition and aiming by being easier to see in low light conditions. Large front sights like the Trijicon HD, XS Big Dots, and others allow for faster acquisition due to enhanced visibility at their given focal plane. In either case, speeding up sight acquisition at a distance or situation where intentional aim is required is speeding up your application of effectiveness. Compensators. A comp does nothing more than direct recoil impulse against the muzzle in the opposite direction of rise to decrease the mechanical flip upon firing. As before, if the weapon moves less mechanically before being ready to fire again, a volley of fire is faster due to the shorter trip. This would be a great place to note that a close-range gunfight is rarely won with a single round. Red dot optics. Red dot optics, often referred to as red dot sights or RDSs, increase speed by making the aiming instrument, in this case the dot itself rather than a front sight, easier and faster to acquire due to its relative contrast to the environment and a lack of need for front to rear alignment. Red dot optics also increase speed by allowing the shooter to stay target or threat focused, as is natural, rather than take the time to transition from target or threat to the focal plane of a front sight. As someone who has made this transition between focal planes in combat with standard iron sights and also avoided the need to do so on holographic optics equipped weapons, I assure you it is no small gain and advantage. Overriding your sympathetic stress's desire to threat focus and intentionally acquiring sight picture and alignment under threat of death is, let's say, difficult. Grip enhancements. Grip enhancements like stippling, grip tape, grip sleeves, etc. supposedly help speed up shots by aiding in a proper grip on the firearm, limiting the travel that disrupts a fast and efficient return to presentation prior to a follow-up shot. Many argue that grip enhancements are unnecessary, as a truly proper grip is trainable and negates the need for their use. This may be true, but adding a safety net for proper grip isn't going to stand in the way of the application of proper training. Flared magazine wells. Flared or enhanced magazine wells simply help funnel a new magazine into its seated position by widening the pathway into the magazine well. While a person might be statistically unlikely to need to reload a weapon in a defensive handgun engagement, I must go back to the notion that having it might help but cannot hurt. If you did find yourself in a situation where a reload was necessary, a flared magwell is a nice thing to have. As a side note, it's always funny to me when the same person who spends 90% of his or her time filming mag changes for Instagram makes an argument against a flared magwell because it's unlikely to be needed in self-defense. Extended controls. Extended controls like magazine releases, slide stops, and/or slide releases, depending on which online cult you belong to, are intended to make weapons manipulations more efficient, which usually means faster. It is important to note that many people shoot guns with these enhancements well on a static range, but often find themselves unintentionally dropping mags or locking the slide to the rear when the shooting drills or situations become dynamic. As with anything that requires mechanical skill, consistent, repetitive practice as close to the intended environment of use is necessary. In short, these may help or hurt on a case-by-case basis. Weighted guide rods. Weighted guide rods are intended to increase speed by adding ounces to the front portion of the gun, allowing gravity to have more of an effect on muzzle flip or rise. How much difference do these few ounces make? It's hard to say. Maybe none in reality. Once again, however, does it hurt? Probably not. I've run both standard guide rod assemblies and weighted guide rods and perceived no real advantage to the weighted options, but also noted no disadvantages either. Okay, now on to Group 2's breakdown. Trigger kits again. Trigger kits also aid in the application of accuracy by making it easier to apply the fundamentals of marksmanship. It's simply easier to manipulate a lighter, shorter trigger properly. This isn't a replacement for training, but is a potential force multiplier when absolute accuracy is needed. Can you imagine a cop in the 60s not cocking the hammer on his double-action .357 Magnum when taking a headshot at a hostage taker at 15 yards? I can't. I doubt he says, I've trained. I'll go ahead and pull the entire 1-inch trigger at 12 pounds rather than shorten it to a 1/4 inch at 2 pounds. Shorter is easier. Easier is better. Sights. Aftermarket sights can also help with the application of accuracy if they are designed to do so. This typically means they are either finely adjustable to pinpoint, point of aim, and point of impact, or they have tighter tolerances between the perception of space between the front sight width and rear sight notch. Tighter aim equals tighter groups when time is allotted for optimal application of fundamentals. Red dot optics. Red dot optics can also potentially help with accuracy by placing a smaller MOA reference point as compared to a typical front sight that is still acquirable due to relative contrast. This pays the biggest dividends at long ranges where more of the target is covered by a front sight because of relative optical size at distance. For example, your thumb is as big as a person's face at 5 yards and as big as a door at 35 yards. You've probably heard the phrase, aim small, miss small. There's a lot of truth to it. Match grade barrels. Match grade barrels are another one of those pieces of kit that may be hard to identify the practical improvements in the real world. That being said, if you are buying a threaded barrel for a silencer or compensator, odds are that it's billed as a match grade barrel, even if that's not why you bought it. Once again, risking beating the dead horse. It might not help a lot, but it won't hurt at all. Now that we've covered all of that, I ask you to think about the original statement. You don't need blank for a defensive pistol. That stuff is for competition shooting. Based on the reality that the same thing that wins shooting competitions also wins gunfights, proper balance of speed and accuracy, what gun parts apply to one win and not the other? Do any? I'd argue that if a person can make a logical reason to have a certain part in a competition shooting environment, it is likely to be applicable to a duty or defensive environment for the same exact reason. Imagine, if you will, two highly competitive competition shooters vying for the win at an IDPA match. They get into a heated argument about a stage and decide to duke it out at high noon the next day. You know, old school, take 10 paces, turn, and the fastest man walks away. Maybe. I guess there's always a chance for a tie. Can you imagine either of them saying to themselves, preparing to potentially fight to the death, let me take off this RMR, compensator, aftermarket trigger, and match grade barrel. I don't need this in a gunfight. Stock is all I need. Stock will be more reliable. Unlikely. Actually, it's asinine to think that would happen. He'd want his fastest, most accurate weapon in hand, ready to lay down tight groups and fast splits. After all, what's a bigger competition than a fight for your life? The two caveats to all this are reliability and training for what's in your hand. Aftermarket parts can disrupt the reliability of an otherwise acceptably dependable weapon. For that reason, any gun should be put through its paces before being trusted with your life or safety, stock or otherwise. Once you are satisfied that your gun in its current configuration is ready for the real world, train with it. I didn't say shoot with it, I said train with it. Go to classes, shoot in inclement weather, shoot under time, shoot under stress, shoot at night, shoot fast and close, shoot far and slow. Buying parts does not buy skill. It can, however, buy a slightly sharper edge, and in a game of inches and fractions of a second, where the trophy is tomorrow, don't let the ignorant, ego-driven trolls tell you that a stock sharp is sharp enough. They might be right, and they might not be. I, for one, will take whatever edge I can get.